Hi, my name is Dr. Pamela Fullerton, and I am a mental health therapist in Chicago, Illinois. I just really needed to talk to the community today about mental health within our immigrant communities. We have been seeing a number of storylines recently about this young girl, this 11-year-old girl, Jocelynn Carranza from Texas, who ended her life by suicide, allegedly because of the incessant bullying she's been receiving because of her immigrant background, because she was a young Latina girl, being bullied over things around her family's immigration status, potentially threatening to call ICE. Imagine the amount of fear this young girl must have been in every single day of her life, not only because of threats she may be receiving from peers, but because of the high amount of anti-immigrant bullying, anti-immigrant sentiment, brown and black sentiment, particularly the racism within our country, the xenophobia within our country. And we really need to start shedding more light on the significant mental health issues that we are seeing in the immigrant communities, that we have been seeing, that very few people actually talk about. And so we need to talk about it. I'm here to talk about it, and I really want you all to open your, not only ears to listen, but open your hearts to understand why this is such a significant topic that we as human beings need to be more attuned to, right? And so we're seeing high levels of depression, high levels of anxiety amongst these communities. We have been for a while. Anytime that we see shifts in immigration policies or agendas, shifts in immigrant sentiment, whether it's, we're accepting of immigrants or most of the time we are not accepting of immigrants, the impacts that has on a human being, right? To know that the community that you're around doesn't support you, to know that the government that's supposed to protect you isn't protecting you and in fact is putting you in harm's way. To have to live with those things day in and day out, the fear, the worry, the anxiety, feeling like you don't belong, those lead to what we see as significant mental health issues. And of course, the most severe being suicide, right? And that's what we saw potentially happening in this poor girl's life and her poor family's life that now have to live with not having this little girl around. That's the most severe case. But I want to talk about additional cases. I don't want it to get to suicide. Nobody wants to get to suicide, right? And so starting in issues like depression, like anxiety, right, that we're seeing high levels of in our community, we need to start there and understand the real feelings, the significant feelings that we in this immigrant population are having around being in a nation that isn't caring for us and that is harming us. And then the next segment, I'm going to talk about specifically when all those issues rise up, right? When they kind of start to climb in us and shoot out of us like a volcano, what does that look like in terms of severity and getting to the point of thinking ending our life is the only way out of this horrible state? So let's talk about suicide. And I'm going to talk to you through a kind of culturally responsive lens around our most prominent theory of suicide, which is Thomas Joiner's Interpersonal Theory of Suicide. You can see the image above me, right? And I'm going to walk you through it and let you understand how that connects to the immigrant community right now. So the interpersonal theory of suicide kind of gives us three red flags, right? Three important red flags to be looking out for when it comes to having any kind of suicidal thoughts or behaviors. And they're in no particular order. So the first one I'm going to talk about is this idea of thwarted belongingness. And what Joiner meant by that is that this particular red flag is all about feeling like you don't belong, feeling like you're alone, feeling like nobody understands you, nobody cares about you, nobody wants you, kind of a thing. And the basic understanding about human beings is that we all have a need to belong. We have to feel like we belong, like we're a part of our communities, our families, our bigger, system and society, like we're connected all together, right? Imagine taking that away from somebody. And currently, the immigrant community, many members of the immigrant communities feel that they don't belong. The horrible rhetoric spoken about immigrant communities, the very fact that the current president of the United States says the most heinous, hateful, horrible things about immigrants, particularly Black and brown immigrants, right, speaks to the fact that even at the highest level, people are saying hateful things about the immigrant communities, making them feel that they don't belong to this nation, don't belong to this society, don't belong to this community, right? That's red flag number one. Red flag number two is this feeling of perceived burdensomeness, okay? So this idea of being a burden is like being a heavy weight on somebody. Now, we're going to relate this to the immigrant community. We see the rhetoric, the talking around immigrants being the reason for all the problems in the United States. Immigrants being the reason for drugs coming into this country. Immigrants being the reason for violence and crime. Immigrants being the reason for XYZ, whatever problem that people are making up that they're blaming the immigrants on. That's the idea that, oh, we're the problem, we're the burden, right? And if we just get rid of them, things will be so much better. Of course, we know that's a lie. That's always been a lie throughout history. Find the scapegoat, find the person you're going to blame, right? And in this case, right now, it's the immigrant community. So you can imagine that immense sense of feeling like a burden, right? Or even being in your family and being the person who maybe is undocumented, right? That may be bringing that fear and worry to the family. And we have so many mixed status families in this country. So we can imagine the people who feel like they're a burden, like they're causing a problem, not only to their nucleus family, but to the larger society. That's red flag number two. You put those two red flags together, and it starts to create a really terrible recipe for disaster. Because then the third piece starts to kick in, which is being able to end one's life, all right? Our brain is a super complex system, right? But at the same time, we can understand something very simple about the brain. It was created to survive. The first part of the brain that was created, which is this back part here, it was created solely for survival. We will do anything as human beings to survive. Now, in order to circumvent that system, there has to be such a heavy weight on the brain, on the body, on the mind, on the soul, for all of them to get together and say, we are going to take this survival system and we're going to push it to the side so that we're able to end our life. Think about what a desperate, helpless stage somebody has to be in to circumvent the one thing we were made for, which was to survive, all right? That's the state these individuals are being put in because of those other red flags that I just talked about. You add to the fact that many of our communities, many of our immigrant communities have experienced violence, have experienced trauma, whether pre-migration, during migration, or post-migration here into the United States. And all of those add a vulnerability of feeling like I've seen violence, it's happened right in front of me, or it's happened to me. You add all those factors in, and they're like, yeah, I can end my life. I've seen how it's been done. I am capable of it. You add those three together, and now we're talking about severe, severe problems that we are going to continue to see in our community, which is why we need to be talking about it more and why everybody needs to address it in our communities, outside of our communities, and why we need to come together to make people feel like we care about them, to make them feel like they belong. And that's what I'm going to talk about in part 3. Here we are in part 3. We've talked about severity of mental health, maybe starting as intense feelings of depression, anxiety, fears, and worries, mixed in with like daily life stressors, right? And then they're compounded to get to a point where we start to see some of those
Interpersonal Theory of Suicide, red flags, feeling like we don't belong, feeling like we're a burden, having the capacity to end our life. And as I stated before, it is a severe recipe for disaster. And we're seeing suicide related thoughts and behaviors in our immigrant communities at high rates, and we have been. It's just not something that many people talk about, which is why I really wanted to illuminate this topic. So for this third section, I want to look through the eyes of this very polarizing Instagram video that Selena Gomez put out, and she started to cry when discussing the administration's deportation and anti-immigrant policies, and she just became so overwhelmed and so vulnerable, and I applaud her for doing that. Now, why this video was polarizing, at least in my opinion as a mental health professional, was because so many of us are so uncomfortable with heavy feelings, with these intense feelings. And there's always a skepticism, it seems like, when people become vulnerable. And I choose to look at this video through a very different lens, one that kind of starts with our ancestry. I think about the recent Super Bowl halftime show with Kendrick Lamar. There was so many historical references, and I even wrote about some of them. And just so many people didn't understand about the Black and African community within the United States. And there are ancestral and historical stories in the Latino communities and in the immigrant communities, long histories of colonization, long histories of genocide, long histories of feeling like communities are being targeted and attacked, not cared for, long histories of feeling like made to believe like they don't belong. And so I believe that this pain and suffering that Selena Gomez experienced is not only ancestral in the fact that many of us carry such intergenerational trauma based on our colonized histories, but also the mere, pain and suffering that human beings are experiencing right now because of these anti-immigrant policies and anti-immigrant sentiments. If you see what's happening to human beings, you see their suffering, and you don't break down and cry, I'm slightly concerned about that. If you can watch the amount of suffering happening in our communities and think, oh, that's just another day in our life, I'm slightly concerned about that because we should be having a feeling of sadness, of remorse, of pain, of suffering when we see the suffering of other human beings. That's called empathy. That's called human morality. That's the idea of humanity. And we should be feeling sad. We should be feeling angry when we see human beings suffering, and we should be wanting to do something about that. To not do something, to sit in a stance of helplessness or neutrality, which is even worse, and say it's not my problem, or I don't want to get involved, or I'm not apolitical. You're part of the problem and not part of the solution. And human suffering is going to continue if we don't do something about it. So, we're talking about mental health. What resources do you have available, no matter who you are or where you live? Well, first and foremost, please, I encourage you to come to our website, www.a-consulting.com/resources. There are free mental health resources on there, practices that you can learn from breathing in order to like relax yourself, in order to decompress, in order to reduce stress or anxiety, to things around mindfulness practices, and so much more. And they're all free. Just go to the website, download what you need. Instructions are all on the sheets. There are also larger organizations, nationwide organizations like NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Health, And through the government, the HRSA, which is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, you can go to those websites and find free information about mental health services nationwide. The HRSA website, findahealthcenter.hrsa.gov. You put in where you live, the public or community-based health centers will pop up. If you're in my state of Illinois, or in and around the Chicagoland area, the Chicago Department of Public Health also has a website that says what community you live in, what are all the behavioral mental health centers around you, and then there's even something called Open Path Collective, which again, you go there, you say where you live, they give you community resources where you can go to find mental health centers. I want people to go get help. If you are underinsured or uninsured, these organizations tell you where there's community behavioral health centers or people who take pro bono cases or sliding scales cases, right? If you have insurance, all you got to do is flip your insurance card to the back, call the number, say you're looking for behavioral health services, and they'll send you either a link to go to where you can put in where you live to find resources near you, or they'll give you a list, right? Either way, you have access. Please take advantage and access those resources. Immigrant communities in particular underutilize health resources for a number of reasons. One, many of them don't have access to it. Two, maybe sometimes they don't know how to navigate these resources. And three, sometimes they're just scared to reach out, right? Thinking that maybe I'll come out of the shadows and all of a sudden there's going to be somebody there, to cause harm. Or in this case, right, as ICE is spreading fear among everybody, maybe scared of being known or being deported, having your information being sent to the government in some way, shape, or form. When it comes to mental health for the most part, I don't want to say 100% because you never know now about this government, but for the most part, we are discreet. There are laws protecting individuals' information. We don't put anything down that's going to alert anybody to your documentation status or your family's documentation status or what you're going through, right? Those are the laws around mental health resources, that they are protected, and it's for the means of you being able to share your most intimate, deepest issues and concerns with your therapist, to know that you can trust them and they're going to be able to help and support you. So please, I encourage you to take advantage of the resources that there are. Get the help right now. We love you. We care about you. You do belong. You belong here. Your life makes a difference in all of our lives. That is what we truly believe as mental health counselors. So please, please, if you're having any kind of issues, even the smallest stressors that are kind of adding up to severe issues like having suicide-related thoughts and behaviors, I implore you to please reach out and get the services that you need. If you need help, we are here. I have the most wonderful team. Anybody will answer the call, even if you're from another state, and we will help you find resources that you need. So please feel free to reach out to our organization, www.a-econsulting.com. Please reach out to me personally if you're looking for additional supports, pfullerton@a-econsulting.com. That's my email. We are here for you. My message is that we care. Mental health is important, and we want everybody to get the services that they need. Please take care of yourself and please take care of your community. Thank you.